Today we're recording on Gadigal country.
And we'd like to pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the Gadigal people.
I know you're gonna dig this.
It's like I've been given like an extra sprinkle of something.
You got layers.
Yeah, I got layers.
I was just thinking, I'm like, we're just such beautiful storytellers.
You're making a lot of sense today, girl. No, I'm done.
Let's jump into it, honest to God.
So now that the federal election is over and the Liberals are left licking their wounds, we thought it would be a good idea to start talking about politics. Because as mob, we know we are inherently political, unfortunately.
What does that mean? Tell me what that means.
Well, to me, that means that a lot of politics are thrust upon our lives automatically.
Okay.
You know what I mean? As a group of people. So, that's why I say unfortunately, because we didn't choose this path. We didn't choose this life. But as you know, Brooke, a lot of our mob don't understand politics, haven't had the education around politics, and also it inherently also isn't that important to us because it's not a part of our community in terms of how our community
govern our things.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
So we thought we would get an expert in. A mate of the
Where
PM.
is he?
No, today we have Joe Hildebrand.
Feels so cool all of a sudden.
Oh,
You
really?
are
You
cool.
guys.
No, thanks so
I'm
much
just-
for coming
Oh,
on.
no, it's an absolute pleasure. I love your work.
and taking the time out because you're a busy man. We were saying
Yeah,
before.
well, you know, we are busy, but it's good to be busy. It's better to be busy than
Yeah.
to be dead. And
Oh, my God.
In this game, they're the only two alternatives.
Well,
Yeah.
you did something exciting just before the election. You had the PM on your pod.
Oh, yeah.
So you're one of the only pods that he jumped on. You know, it was Abby Chatfield and
Abby
your
Chatfield and me. That's right. Yeah,
Yes.
So tell me, how did that come about? And
How was the chat?
Yeah, I heard you have a long existing relationship with the PM.
Yeah. I look, I like Albo. We go back a very long way. I was pretty close to Kevin Rudd. You probably weren't born when he was Prime Minister,
no,
but
no.
I do
I
remember
remember
the
him.
apology. Like
But,
I do remember.
yeah, he gave the
Yes.
apology, and
Yeah.
and that was a huge moment, obviously, for First Australians, and it was hopefully going to be the kind of first step in this sort of ongoing journey. I hate using the word journey, but to reconciliation. I know, but it just keeps coming out,
I
doesn't it?
know.
The reconciliation and closing the gap, and that marked the sort of the closing the gap thing, and sadly that gap hasn't closed. But and then the Labor Party just destroyed itself, and I basically got PTSD. And it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And Albo was one of those people who was always, throughout that period where people were chopping and changing and loyalties were being tested and people were swapping sides and all the factions were all messed up, and I could go into all that stuff and it'll bore everyone to death. But Albo stayed pretty true, and I just remember thinking, this is someone who has actually behaved with integrity and decency as much as anyone does in politics. Like no one has pure integrity.
No,
but he's a decent bloke. He's down to earth. And I sort of just always backed him, and I backed him as a leadership, as a leader for the Labor Party when no one else was. Like everyone was. There was no way that that's ever going to happen. Bill Shorten's going to come and he's going to win in 2019. He almost won in 2016.
He did, yeah, I do remember that actually.
And then sort of miracle happened, and Albo became leader, and then he became PM, and then he was going to lose the last election, everyone said, and.
So maybe as a part of your job title, it's psychic.
Maybe it's psychic. That's right. Maybe I'm the Albo whisperer.
Yeah.
That's right. I just manifest Albo. That's my superpower. It's like, what can you do, Superman? I can fly and I'm invulnerable. What can you do, Joe? I can manifest Albo.
So who's the next PM?
Yeah.
But yeah. So I got in on the ground floor with that guy. So we are pretty close, and I think we have we're mates, and so
That's good.
yeah. I said,
That's cool.
do you want to come on the podcast? And he said, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
he just
we wanted him actually on our podcast, didn't we? We were pitching.
Oh, you should have let me know. I could have greased the wheels for you.
Totally.
Thank you.
Look,
but-
I think that he was trying to keep a low profile, I think, and he only got on. He went to places where he trusted people, so he doesn't know us.
I'm sure he would know you and trust you and love you very, very much. I thought I was the only.
Yeah.
For a while, I thought I was the only podcast he hadn't been on because he was popping up all over the place.
But they're back in. What do you think of the Labor victory?
Look, obviously, I'm pretty biased, but I think it was a great victory. I was one of those people who said it's going to be a Labor majority. All these people were saying, it's 53-47, it's going to be a hung parliament. It's like, no, 50-50 is a hung parliament.
That's right.
that's
53, you know what I mean? Like all these polls were showing really big swings to the Labor Party. Normally, the government gets swings against it the second time it goes up, and it was getting swings in the other direction. And I think people just weren't believing what they were seeing because, because of what had happened, for example, in 2019 when everyone thought Labor was going to win.
Yeah.
Even though the situation was completely different. And so I was very confident. Albo, I think it's fair to say, was pretty confident.
Yeah.
And again, I was looking at the numbers and it's like, well, this matches up exactly with what I'm hearing, but everyone's sort of talking about something else. So I thought it was, but having said that, the result exceeded everyone's expectations.
Yeah, Albo
like,
knew he was
even
going to
Albo's.
win because Joe manifested it.
That's right. How could he not? Yeah, I just told him. So, oh, by the way,
Don't worry
mate, they're
about
going
it,
to win. Yeah, don't even bother campaigning. Just kick back at Kirribilli House with Jody and Toto, your dog. And,
I love that.
imagine? I want to know, like, what is that world like? Like, I guess, like, our experience with politics isn't. I don't know. What's your experience with politics, Maddie? Like,
I honestly would say that for many years I put politics to the side. I say that our community is inherently political, but that was something that actually made me feel like I didn't want to know much because it all seemed like our community was used as a football a lot of the time, and especially even in this current political landscape, I feel like, the welcome to country, not standing in front of the flags, these divisive views were really put against our community. So for me, for many, many years, I felt like the more I knew, the more I was concerned. And so I actually stayed away from understanding. And I felt like I actually didn't want to dive into, the nitty gritty of politics.
Do you think a lot of people do that because it seems like it's a bit too
Yeah, I think...
I guess information overload, overstimulated by all the campaigns. Like, you don't know.
Well, yeah, I think...
What do you think?
I think maybe in our community, there's not that... It might happen in other households and other parts of the Australian community and family groups. But for us, there's not the sit down and let's talk about politics conversation a lot of the time. I don't know if that ever happened in your life. But for me, there was never a moment where my parents or my family seemed invested.
Yep.
And even around the Voice referendum, I felt like, there was a spotlight on our community, but there were so many corners of our community that didn't want a part of it. So I think that, there's also a distrust with the government. There is a disconnection there. Look at the systems that are in place that have negatively affected our community.
And it's another institution. in a sense,
there's not a lot of trust, I think. So there has definitely been a disconnection from our community. But I want our community to know more, and I'm actually really encouraged by the stats that I saw with this election and how many people came out to vote.
Yeah,
I think that it shows, even though I had this view that our country's quite chill around politics, people still, and maybe the Voice referendum made me a little concerned about what this political outcome would be. But I think the stats of people getting out there and actually having a say in using their vote has been encouraging for me to know more. And that's one of the reasons I suggested doing an episode like this, because I'm like, okay, if the masses are interested, I need to now... figure out where I stand in politics.
Oh,
so you're the man. You're the man for the job.
No. Well, I think what you were saying before and at the top of the show, I think was really interesting. This idea that in black communities, people feel like politics isn't something they're involved with. It's something that happens to them. It's something that comes down from them, on them from above, and often has a kind of crushing effect. And I think that has been that's obviously been a huge problem throughout our history. Yeah. But it's also, I think, still kind of a problem now, and I think it's why we saw things like, the Voice result that we did, where there's not that, I suppose, full engagement with how politics and politicking works and how the machinery of politics works. And politics isn't kind of it's not like a sort of matrix that you get into. It's something, it's all around. It's everything, right?
Yeah.
Everything.
Everything is politics. So in terms of, when you're talking about trying to win a referendum, I obviously supported the yes campaign, but so quickly I just saw the whole thing falling apart.
Yeah.
I saw it just, and I was going nuts. I mean, we talk about I'll be a bit canned, but we talk about, I'm like texting people, the PMs, we've got to fucking do something about this. It's going off the rails. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And they were trying everything. And of course, because it's politics, right? One of the things that the government didn't want to do is kind of look like it was owning it too much. Albo didn't want it to say, want it to be my voice, the Prime Minister's voice, or Labor's voice.
Yeah.
That was how the coalition, that was how the opposition was trying to cast it.
Absolutely.
This is the politicians, this is Labor's voice.
Yeah.
You're saying, no, this is
self-determination.
This is what, the Uluru, the gathering at Uluru wanted. And, this is for Indigenous people, this is for, First Nations people. But then there was kind of a lack of clarity among First Nations people. So, black leaders, Indigenous leaders are sort of fighting amongst themselves or contradicting each other about what it should look like.
And that's not a good
And that just
look.
keeps going on.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so...
That's what people are seeing.
Yeah.
Like,
And so people are seeing, so you've got 60% of Australians who think, oh yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And then they sort of see this whole thing, which I think is born of, I was speaking to someone in the campaign about, I said, you can't have sort of people I really, really love and respect, like, Noel Pearson is, just a hero of mine. Or then you had people like Marshall Langton, who's a bit more sort of fiery and nice. But again, someone I
really
respect enormously.
Yeah.
But coming out and saying things like, oh, well, if you don't vote for it, you're not going to get any more welcomes to country, or, this is being driven by racism.
Yes.
People who oppose it are racist and stuff. I'm seeing all this stuff. So this is poison. This is toxic.
Yeah.
Because you've just told anyone who's got misgivings about it that they're either racist or that they're so stupid or
so
gullible
you're
that
kind
they're
of backing
taken
them
in
into
from.
a corner in a sense.
That's right. And so
people feel like...
that's right. And again, this might be. And so I was speaking to people at the campaign and said, what are these guys doing? And And they said, well, they're not campaigners. Of course, they're not politicians, so they're going off script.
Yeah.
And again, so this is what happens when you don't know politics, or you don't know sort of how politics work, or the way messages are received by the community.
Yeah.
Then you're going to sort of sleepwalk off a cliff on an issue that, or something that could have been a real game changer. So I guess that's... So people say, oh, I don't know much about politics or whatever. You do. You just don't kind of know, Like everything you do is political.
Yeah.
Everything that affects you, why didn't The Voice get up? Well, you can call it politics. You could just call it
Every choice
real
you make.
real life Australians who just weren't connecting with it. There wasn't people didn't feel a connection or a relationship with what they were being offered. So you could call that politics. So I guess I would just say, don't feel like politics is just something that happens to you. Politics is something you're doing all the time. It's not some weird esoteric thing that all these smart people are doing in kind of boardrooms.
Yeah, there's not people. Yeah, there's not a big boardroom, and they're all like making decisions.
Right.
Like,
this is something that
they're like, oh, we saw your TikTok. Yeah, no, like it's not that sort of chart. It's deeper and it's a bit more
that's right.
Down the there's levels and layers to it. I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's right. And so like even when the PM comes on my podcast, we just sort of we're not talking about how do you get a piece of legislation through the Senate. So what's it like? How do you deal with all the shit that you cop on social media, or how do you? That's right. Or what is someone says, oh, the Russians are going to use Indonesia as an air base right on Australia's doorstep. How do you respond? Like, how do you respond to information like that?
Yeah.
And a lot of the way you do that is as a human being and what your instincts are and what you kind of feel is right and what you feel like the first thing to do is. So again, politics is personal, the personal is political, it's everything. It's all around us.
Were you surprised by any of the results? Like a lot of people in the community were quite surprised about the Greens.
Yeah.
There's been such a massive social campaign around, Adam and the Greens, and there was a lot of, I suppose, new voices, new media encouraging the Greens and what they were standing for. But then
me and Abby Chatfield, my fellow podcaster, my PM whisperer.
So it's interesting to see the responses to the Greens losing their seat. Did you see that happening?
I knew that they were going to lose some of their seats, or at least one. Brisbane was always in trouble, and then that's obviously in Brisbane, and then another Brisbane seat, Griffith, where Max Chandler-Mather, the housing, very high-profile housing spokesman, is. Labor really wanted to go after that. That was, and you talk about politics being personal. That was Kevin Rudd's old seat.
Okay,
and that wasn't a seat that both Labor and the Greens were going for, and the Greens won. That was a Labor seat that the Greens took off them.
Wow.
Which Labor was not expecting to lose.
Yeah.
in 2022. So it's like the sort of the sequel to the Hollywood action blockbuster. You know,
Revenge.
they're back, and this time it's personal.
Redemption. Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Totally.
So you know, people in Labor really, you know, instinctively, personally, you know, they could have got seats from anywhere else, and they did.
Yeah.
But they really wanted to get that one back because it felt like a
Wow.
kind of personal blow to Labor's, you know, kind of
Yeah.
heartland.
Yeah.
You know, a former prime minister's seat.
Yeah.
So again, they were targeting that very heavily, and
Yep.
were happy to get it. I don't think anyone thought that Adam Batt would lose his seat
Yeah.
in Melbourne.
That's
No,
right.
I find that surprising.
And again, Labor didn't put much money into that seat, but he ended up losing really badly. Like the actual overall vote in the
Yeah.
country didn't do too badly.
That's
Like
right.
it's about the same.
Yeah, I think
That's what
people
they
are
got.
trying to explain that as well.
That's
yeah.
right. So and they're getting like we were talking before about, you know, young people overwhelmingly vote
Yeah.
for the Greens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that young people are not all living. There's not one seat which is just like 100% young people.
right.
They're spread out everywhere. So you can get 12, 13% of the vote.
Yeah.
But unless you can get enough to knock out, so all you have to do if you're a Greens trying to win a seat, you
Knock
just
out
have to knock
Liberal.
out. You just have to knock out Labor.
Labor,
What,
yeah.
what you
Labor,
really want to do
Labor,
is
yes,
knock out Labor
yes.
because you're going to get more of their
That's
preferences.
right, their preferences.
So you
Yes.
don't want to run first. You can't, but you just want to run second. If
Okay.
you can just get second and knock out Labor and not Lib. So if you knock out the Lib,
Bit of silver
they're
medal.
probably going to go to Labor before they go
That's
to you.
right, yeah.
If you can knock out Labor, you get all their preferences. And so this is why I've always said the Greens are not really Labor's friend.
Okay.
They actually, the Greens do best by eating away at Labor's votes and in lower house seats by trying to relegate Labor to third so they can steal all their preferences.
Yeah,
That's a great
wow.
explanation.
So-
Like, it
Absolutely.
makes so much more sense to my in my head. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can
Totally.
they're
I
good.
actually tried to explain that to my partner,
Yeah.
who's just become an Australian citizen.
Yeah.
Hasn't done the test. Has done the test, but has done the ceremony, and then we'll vote next year.
Yeah,
but
great.
I was trying to explain this, and I've done such a terrible job. I've realised because he looked so confused. He was like, okay, we're going to move on from this."
Yeah. It is.
It's like you have to draw it on a whiteboard.
I was
and
like,
know.
yeah, well, the preference is like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you know, the 1 to 6. I'm like,
So think about because a lot of people from, especially like Australia's really, really rare in that
Yes.
it's got compulsory voting.
that's right.
And that's a really, really good thing, right? So
It is,
people
yeah.
say, "Oh, we shouldn't have it. You know, you should have the right not to vote. Whatever, don't care. You don't,
Yeah.
like you say, you don't have the right not to be governed.
Yeah.
You don't have the right not for politics to not happen to you. It's like,
That's right.
sorry, no, I don't want to pay my taxes
Yeah.
because I'm not into politics or I don't vote. I
that
don't
be
do
nice?
government.
You wish.
You don't have the right, so you might as well express it. And it means
Yeah.
that
If you don't vote, you get fined.
You do.
tiny amount.
50
Yeah.
If they
50
if
yeah,
they find
if
you.
they
It
find
only just
you.
went up to 50. It used to be 20.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
But,
think in my
I
first
think, yeah.
year, I think when I was in my early 20s, we had an election, and I didn't vote
Yeah.
because I just
Yeah,
I was at uni or
Think about
something,
all-
and I was like, I don't know.
Remember all those local government elections you voted in?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, you know what? For
Did
me,
they ever
remember-
find it? No, they never find it.
Exactly.
my
But-
family, this is the first year that I encouraged my family to vote. Like,
Yeah.
so that's how I that trigger for me was, I'm actually being a little bit more,
There you
like
go. You're a political
productive.
animal.
I'm
You're
a
a
political
political
animal.
animal.
So I messaged my brothers on the day, my dad and everyone, and they all went and voted. And I think that's maybe possibly the first time in
That's
their
why
adult
Labor
life.
won.
You know what
Maddie.
it is. It
Albo
actually
owes
is.
his victory to you and
He
your
does.
family.
I did my part.
But yeah, the good thing about compulsory is it means that you don't have to rely on what's called getting out the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that something like Donald Trump can't happen in Australia.
Yep.
Because
Good.
if you don't really care much one way or another about Donald Trump,
Yeah.
you just sit at home. You just
Yeah.
don't come out to vote.
Yes.
And in an American election, maybe only 50 to 60 to 70% of people might actually vote. So
Yeah.
about a third might just stay home.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, all those people have to come out and vote.
That's
And
right.
so if they're not into... So being extreme and making people excited or angry or scared about an issue, like... So in America, it's always abortion and it's always gun rights, right?
It is.
Yeah.
No one cares about that here.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
no
yeah,
one's
yeah.
voting on that stuff
That's right.
here because it's all really boring bread and butter. It's like whether you
Totally.
get a $150 rebate on your power bill, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But in America, they do that because those are the issues that people really, really care about. There are people who come out and vote for their right to
Yeah.
carry a gun or to have an abortion
Yeah.
or to stop other people having an abortion. And that's the number one most important thing to them because they're a Christian or they're a feminist or they're a gun owner or whatever.
Religion, like it
That-
plays
whatever
a
it
whole
is,
lot. Yeah.
but
yeah,
it's what you're most excited about, and that means that American elections are about issues that are really passionate, but also often polarizing.
I was going to say very polarizing.
Exactly. And we're really lucky that we don't have that here. And so,
Yeah.
so in first past the post, which is what they call it in the UK or in America, where you got to get out the vote, you might get the best candidate. Australia, what you want is to get the least worst candidate. So the preferential voting system means that you might not get even, a Greens MP in a seat who actually ran behind, the Labor or Liberal candidate, or, in the Teal seats. The Liberals get more votes, first preference votes, than the Teals do. Like
Is
Monique,
Teals
right?
independents?
Teals are the independents, right?
Why are they called Teals? Is just the colour?
Because that's the colour. So they were all meant to be independents, but someone noticed that they all had the same colour and the same branding, and so and were all getting funding from the same source. And everyone goes, "Hang on a minute, they're not really independents; they're Teals."
Yeah. Okay.
And so they
Sorry if that was a silly question.
But
I
Aren't
didn't understand.
they I don't know how to say this nicely, but aren't they like a lot of white women?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I'm driving through the eastern
exactly what they
suburbs,
are.
I'm like, wow, these people have massive budgets for promo.
They're basically like really rich Greens.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's right. And
How do I get their money?
and you just call Simon at Holmes a court and he'll give it to you. But so the Teals, they don't win on the first preferences, but they collect all the preferences from Greens and Labor and everything. And so they're not the best candidate. The person who wins the most, number one on their ballot, is might be the Lib, but the Teals are like the least worst. So they're what everyone else would rather not have a Lib and have anyone else.
Yeah,
basically.
That's right.
And that's how the Teals get elected. Does that make sense? Or I just made it more confusing?
Makes sense.
Before we go, I wanted to just quickly ask
Yeah.
Joe. I think one of the main things when it comes to politics is not understanding the structure. So is it possible from the top down to give us a quick run through of what holds our country together in terms of the systems?
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing about what holds our country together is it's the vibe, right?
Okay.
We've got a constitution.
That's very Brooke.
We've got
very
we've got
I'm here for the vibe.
I'm all about the vibe. Tell you what, if you can read the vibe in politics, you are
love
going all the
structure.
way. If you can think, I think this is what I've got a gut feeling that this is
That could be a campaign.
this is how I feel about this thing, and I think pretty much most Australians are with me. You're done.
He
See?
laughs at me, but I think I have a
Vibe.
very strong gut feeling. Like
Yeah,
I think I have intuition.
Totally.
I have a gut feeling that you have a gut feeling.
Yeah, I actually have a
And
gut
that
feeling that you
gut
both
feeling
have a
is
gut
no, I have a feeling
It's
that
not
your
just
gut
my
feeling is
IBS,
right about
guys.
our gut feeling.
It's not just my IBS.
But yeah, so we've got
Indigenous Bowel syndrome.
just to be incredibly boring and get my geek on.
No,
Yeah.
But we've got a constitution, right? And the constitution just basically says this is how you make decisions. It doesn't make the decisions, and it doesn't even tell you about the prime. You have to have a prime minister, or here's what ministers do when they run departments. Everything that the government actually does every day isn't really in the constitution. All the constitution just does is says, this is how you figure these things out. This is how you decide it. This is how you put together a parliament.
Yeah.
Basically, this is, if the states and the state and federal parliaments have a disagreement, this is who wins. This is the areas that the federal government has control over, and this is that sort of stuff. So, and then everything else is kind of what's just called convention. It's like, well, we do this because this is how it's done. And there are lots of, in ancient Rome, there was no constitution written down. They just called it the Mos Maiorum, the old ways. This is how we do it. In England, there's actually no written constitution. There's just this huge history, and people have to go back and say, oh, what did we do the last time we had this problem? Oh, the Normans invaded, whatever. And so
I didn't know that.
in Australia, we do have a written down constitution, but it basically says this is how you put the parliament together.
Yeah.
And then you sort of figure it out yourself. And so things like, forming government, in the lower house, with the Prime Minister, the head of a cabinet, with ministers in charge of their departments. All of these things are conventions that have just sort of evolved over time. Yep. And the good thing about that is that as times change, we can kind of adapt them. We're not sort of stuck with a bit of paper that says, no matter what's happening, 100 years ago, a bunch of people decided that you had to do this, and now that's what you have to do because this is your document. And this is where the US can sometimes run into trouble it's got, the right to bear arms. That was when, militiamen were using muskets to fight off the English, and now it's being used for Uzis to do drive-by shootings.
Where is this constitution? Is it a book?
Yeah, it's a very small book.
Yeah,
you can get it online. You can just Google it.
There you go.
You can just Google it, and it's actually a really slim, kind of elegant flexible document.
Great.
So it just says, if you can't get your legislation through Parliament, here's how you have a double dissolution and you have another election. And then you just figure it. And then it basically just says, figure it out amongst yourselves. And then
Very Aussie, isn't it?
It's very Aussie, yeah. And it's
Very
and
laid back, like, you'll be right.
That's right.
Mate.
Go on
It's
then.
like- it's like-
go sis.
Go on then.
It's like those sort of new age management workshops where
Yeah.
we're not actually going to solve your problem. We're going to
Yes.
teach you how to solve your own
Yeah.
problems.
The HR of the country.
And then the controversial one, of course, is the reserve powers of the Governor General. So the
Yeah.
one really controversial bit of the Constitution is that the Governor General technically can sack the Prime Minister. Now, it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
The Governor General can dismiss the Prime Minister and say, right, we'll
See you later.
dismiss the government and say, no, go to the polls. So dissolve the government, basically.
Yeah.
But the Governor General also has to act on the advice of the Prime Minister. So
Has this only happened once in our country?
it only happened once, and it happened in 1975. And guess what?
Okay.
It's never, ever going to happen again.
Okay.
Even though it's right there in the Constitution to say the Governor General can do this anytime he or she wants,
Yeah.
but it will never happen again because the vibe.
The vibe.
So-
People
like
just
a-
didn't like it. It was just so
Yeah.
toxic and so bad
Yeah.
that even though the Libs, the coalition, won in a landslide after that decision,
Yeah.
everyone just thought, no, we
Don't
can't
do
do
it.
that again. That's
Yeah.
Who selects the Governor General? Is it the King?
No, it is the PM.
So the PM selects the person who has the power to
Correct.
possibly fire them. Oh, great. I'm going to select a
it's-
mate of mine.
I want to be the Governor General.
That's right. So technically, the Boyle family. So technically, the Governor General is the Vice Regent. So
Yes.
Vice Regal. So the deputy. So the King or Queen's representative.
That's right.
Yeah.
In Australia.
That's
so
right.
usually the Governor General goes around cutting ribbons, the sort of thing the Queen
Yes.
does
Of
back in
course.
the UK, cutting ribbons, opening
Holding
community
babies.
centres.
Yes.
Telling everyone what a good job they're supporting charities.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Governor General is the patron of certain
Yeah.
charities. But all the executive stuff is done by the PM. But technically, according to the Constitution, the Governor General is actually the person who is
In charge of
fully in
Australia.
charge of everything.
Wow.
Right? But the Governor General is meant to act on the advice of the PM and the Executive Council. So
Okay.
there's a it's called Vice Regal, some weird thing.
Yep.
Vice Regal Council. Whatever.
Okay.
So there's meant to be. This is the closest thing that the Constitution has to the cabinet, right?
Okay.
But it's the and you can. There are still sort of official roles that people have. And the most senior would be like the vice president of the council because the Governor General is meant to be the president or whatever.
Yep.
And so the cabinet, technically according to the Constitution, is this advisory body to the Governor General, and the Governor General is the one making all the decisions, and the Governor General is
The one
appointed by His Majesty King Charles.
Wow.
But
are they
that,
really?
It never happens like that. That's just
Exactly.
that's no
I was gonna
relation
say.
Yeah.
with what's going on because
Yeah.
the way that the entire country actually functions
Yeah.
is
the vibe.
entirely based on convention. It's entirely based on the vibe.
I love
and that's
that.
what makes it awesome.
This has been such a great episode. We so appreciate you
Oh
coming
no, I'm
on.
Yeah,
so rapt to
thank
be here. I love you
you.
guys.
Yes.
I love your work.
But I wanted to ask
That's
you
awesome.
one last question, maybe.
Which one are you asking?
Well, I was going to ask, maybe you have a question up your sleeve, but I was going to ask, will you ever go into politics?
I was
Oh.
going to
Yes.
ask yes.
Absolutely no way.
No.
Oh, why?
Because-
Joe, we need you.
God, no, God love you. No, it's just. Remember when Peter Garrett went into it, and I just thought, why would you do this? You go from a position where you're Peter Garrett, you're the lead singer of Midnight Oil, everybody loves you, and you go from that to a job where
Everyone hates
almost
you.
like almost half the country is going to hate you,
Yeah.
and that's if you're winning.
Yeah.
If you're not, it's the other way around. And so.
That's right.
And again, it just it's just such a rough game, and
Yeah.
it's just, and you have to be so tough. I'm probably too much of a sensitive new age guy,
Yeah.
No,
like
same.
the stuff that people hurl at you, like even just when you're in the public eye, it can be a bit full on.
Yeah.
But in politics, like, I talk to politicians about this all, like they do actually get a bit kind of brutalized by it. Like the politicians I know, none of them, like Albo, for example, Chris Minns.
Yeah.
will not even look at. Alba would just not even look at. They will have people who do their social media for them because
I was going to say.
if you looked at the stuff, and I see some of it, you know,
yeah,
because it pops up on that. You know, Instagram's meant to be friendly, man.
Wait, you're telling me that they don't look at their social media? Chris Minns follows me and likes my stories, and it's not even
no,
him.
that's legit. That's true. That's true.
I'm like, he likes my stuff. I'm like, wait, are you in the car on the way to an event and like just having
thinking,
a scroll?
Yeah, he is. That Matty man, he's done it again.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Oh,
well, yeah.
okay.
I mean,
But,
over time,
but
it
it's
would
just
take
brutal, and it's and I think,
spirit.
and there's also a rule of thumb that anyone who wants to be in politics should be immediately disqualified.
Okay.
Because it should be the people, the reluctant leaders that you want, because they're the best ones, because they don't want the power or the.
Yeah.
So by just saying I'd never be a politician.
Wow.
I'm actually the perfect
You're
candidate.
actually the perfect candidate.
Oh my God.
There you go. And you know what your campaign is? All about the vibe.
It's about the vibe, yeah. Vote one Joe for the vibe.
For the vibe. You would get in for that
I reckon I
100%.
would.
But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
First
Love
things
you.
Had the
first.
best time listening to you.
I did.
Thank
I
you.
suddenly feel young and cool again.
You are.
Thank you.
Absolutely. There's no age here. Thank you so much,
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, legends.